Why did everyone look at her that way? Like she didn't belong here. Like her seat was borrowed air. The iPad hit the cabin floor with a sharp crack, a sound that sliced through the soft drone of engines and the murmurs of flight attendants. "Look at this," the man said. His voice was loud enough for half the economy section to hear. "The cleaning lady thinks she can read my fighter jet specs." Lieutenant Brad Collins, 6'3", the kind of man who turned uniforms into armor and arrogance into habit. He bent down, picked up his tablet and held it high like a trophy. The group around him, crisp uniforms, gleaming badges, laughed in perfect formation. And across the aisle, the woman they mocked, Maya Johnson, didn't move. She sat still, quiet, almost too calm. Her worn gray t-shirt clung to a faint coffee stain across her chest. Her brown hair was tied in a loose ponytail. No makeup, no jewelry, just the look of someone trying not to be seen. But her eyes, calm, brown, patient, tracked Brad's every motion. The only giveaway was her hand. 2 fingers brushed the back of her ear, tracing a small scar. A scar from an ejection seat malfunction at 15,000 feet. She survived that day through instinct and training, but none of the people laughing around her would ever know that. "Hey, sweetheart," Brad said. "Sorry to interrupt your Pinterest time, but these are F-35 schematics, classified, not really for housewives." The laughter came like gunfire, quick, cruel, rehearsed. "Probably thinks it's a recipe app," one of them added, Madison Hayes, her smile sharp as a blade. "Walmart clearance rack special. I mean, look at that shirt. She can't even afford a seat upgrade." More laughter. Maya said nothing. She inhaled slowly, 4 counts in, 7 hold, 8 out. Combat breathing. The kind that kept your vision steady at 9 GS when the oxygen line failed. The kind that made the difference between life and a crater. But here, to them, she was just another nobody in economy class. Another face in the blur of passengers. "Unbelievable," muttered another pilot, Tyler Chen, the analytical one. "Next, we'll let janitors into Top Gun. I mean, there's diversity and then there's desperation." Every word stung, but not for her, for them. They just didn't know it yet. Maya adjusted her shirt, where Brad's accidental coffee spill still soaked through. She took out a small, beaten notebook and started sketching. Lines, angles, arcs. To the untrained eye, it looked like doodling. But to a pilot, to anyone who knew, it was the approach pattern for a crosswind landing. "Look, she's pretending to take notes," Madison sneered, pulling out her phone. "Perfect for my Instagram. #good will meets good taste." The camera clicked. Filters and captions danced on her screen. Maya didn't look up. Brad dropped into the seat across from her, his knee grazing hers. The aisle shrank, the air thickened. "So, honey," he said, leaning in, "what makes you think you can understand this? Netflix documentary, boyfriend in the service." The tone dripped condescension. It wasn't a question, it was a performance. Maya met his eyes. No anger, no fear, just a quiet patience that made him falter. For a second, she wasn't on this plane. She was in a cockpit, pulling a dying aircraft out of a spin. She closed her notebook. "You were saying." Brad smirked. "Right, that display. It's thrust-to-weight ratio. Not exactly something you learn from YouTube, assuming you finished high school. The F-35's thrust-to-weight ratio is 1.07 with a full fuel load," Maya said softly. 1.19 with half fuel. Depends on payload and atmospheric conditions. Silence. A full, suffocating silence. Tyler blinked, his confidence flickering. "Google University, huh? Memorized a few numbers. Cute. Bet you couldn't explain what it means in combat." She didn't respond. If you were watching, you might have thought she was scared. She was. She was remembering the day she exceeded that ratio by 3 degrees to evade a missile over northern Syria. She'd almost blacked out, almost. Instead, she'd landed the jet with half her control surfaces gone. But how do you explain that to a man who thinks arrogance is skill? Thought so, Tyler said. Real experience can't be faked. The others laughed again, their voices blending with the hum of engines. Some passengers glanced over, uncomfortable. No one intervened. When humiliation happens quietly, it's easy to ignore. A voice crackled over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be experiencing light turbulence shortly. Please fasten your seatbelts. Maya fastened hers, Brad didn't. The first drop hit like a punch, the plane shuddering hard enough to rattle cups and scatter peanuts. Gasps rippled through the cabin. Maya's body moved automatically, braced feet, tight core, chin down, arms ready. Every motion efficient, precise. Not panic, muscle memory. In row 24, an old man in a wrinkled suit noticed. He'd seen those movements before. Once on a runway, when a pilot came in too hot and still walked away. Brad snorted. Holy hell, look at her, she thinks the plane's crashing. Maya didn't react. The turbulence passed, but the tension didn't. First Officer Maria Rodriguez walked down the aisle, steady despite the bumps. Her eyes scanned the rows and paused on Maya. The way she held her hands, the stillness, the breathing rhythm, it wasn't fear, it was training. You all right, miss? Maria asked, voice calm. I'm fine, thank you. Maria hesitated, then moved on, but not before noticing the watch on Maya's wrist. Matte black, oversized. Military grade. Brad chuckled. See, that's why civilians shouldn't mess with our world. We're trained for chaos. You just pretend. Maya didn't answer. But Mr. Peterson in row 24 was watching closely now. His calloused fingers, marked by burns and cuts, clenched around the armrest. He knew the difference between fear and discipline. And what he saw in Maya wasn't fear, it was control. Her phone buzzed. 5 missed calls, Georgetown University Hospital. Her mother's oncologist. Her breath caught just for a second. The surgery, $250,000, no insurance coverage. The reason she'd walked away from the Air Force. Earth to trailer park, Marcus said. You checking your welfare balance. Laughter again. Even nearby passengers flinched. The cruelty was getting heavy, spilling across rows like spilled fuel. Maya stared at the window, the clouds beyond. Anything but them. She thought of her mother's hands, trembling when she'd handed Maya her wings the day of graduation. You were born to fly, she'd said. And Maya had believed it. Until she had to choose between the sky and the person who raised her. Brad snapped his fingers in her face. Hey, I'm talking to you. She turned her head slowly. And for a heartbeat, his smirk faded. There it was, that look. A look that said, you have no idea what I've seen. The plane jolted again, this time harder. Overhead bins rattled, a child screamed. 15 degrees correction, she murmured to herself. Classic wind shear. Tyler's head jerked up. What did you just say? Nothing important. But First Officer Rodriguez had heard her and froze mid-step. That wasn't something civilians said. Maria crouched near Maya's row. You seem familiar with aircraft behavior. I fly a lot, Maya said carefully. Maria frowned. Military. Maya hesitated. Not anymore. That was true enough. Maria's gaze softened. Whatever your background, good instincts, stay calm. You might just save someone by doing that. As Maria walked away, Maya's smartwatch vibrated again, displaying live telemetry data. Heart rate steady, 58 BPM. Calm under fire. Always. Nice fake watch, Madison said. Mall kiosk special. It was a gift. From who? Madison smirked. Your boyfriend, or did you steal it? More laughter. Maya pulled her sleeve down, covering the device. The world could think what it wanted. It always had. Brad leaned back, stretching. You know what kills me? My tax dollars probably paid for her to sit here. Serving your country, Maya said quietly. Yeah, he said proudly, something you wouldn't understand. Mr. Peterson whispered something under his breath. You have no idea who you're talking to, boy. But no one heard him. Tyler straightened, ready for another test. Fine. What's the corner velocity of an F-35 at 20,000 feet? A smirk. Don't bother Googling. Maya turned her head toward him. Depends on the configuration, she said softly. Clean airframe, 430 knots, with full external stores, 380. The laughter died instantly. Brad blinked. That's classified. Must have good sources, she replied. The shift was subtle but real. Mockery turned into suspicion, pride into unease. Then the sound changed. The hum of the engine, steady all flight, faltered, just once, like a skipped heartbeat. Maya's head tilted. Listening. Her fingers began tapping on the armrest, left, right, left, a rhythm, a calculation. Did you hear that? Brad asked. Maya didn't answer. She already knew. Something wasn't right. The captain's voice came on, calm, too calm. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some technical difficulties with our navigation systems. Passengers stirred, flight attendants hurried. The plane jolted again, harder. Mr. Peterson's paper slipped from his hand. Maya's breathing slowed, 4 in, 7 hold, 8 out. Holy hell, Marcus muttered, what's happening? Reality, Peterson said quietly. Brad's laugh was thin now. Relax, we're trained for this stuff. Are you? Maya asked softly. Because she was. And she could already see the next 20 minutes unfolding. The flickering lights, the altitude changes, the captain's voice breaking just slightly. She could see all of it. And she knew one truth that everyone else was about to learn. When things go wrong at 35,000 feet, arrogance can't save you. But calm might. And Maya Johnson, quiet, stained-shirt Maya, was the calmest person on that plane. How quickly arrogance turns to silence when the world begins to shake. The plane jolted again, harder this time. The overhead bins rattled, plastic creaked, and the faint chime of metal trays echoed through the cabin. The light outside the windows shifted, bright to gray, then back again, like the sky itself couldn't decide whether to hold or break. Maya's eyes moved once from the aisle to the window, then to the ceiling vents. Every vibration told a story. Every noise had meaning. But the others were just starting to notice. What the hell was that? Madison asked, clutching the armrest. Brad tried to smirk, but his voice wavered. Relax, probably turbulence, happens all the time. The old man in row 24, Mr. Peterson, leaned forward. That wasn't turbulence, he said quietly, mostly to himself. That was power fluctuation. Maya heard him. She didn't turn, but the acknowledgement was there, a slight incline of her head. The captain's voice came again, softer, less certain. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing an issue with our electrical system. Please remain calm and seated. Please remain calm. The phrase every pilot dreads saying. Maya took a breath, 4 in, 7 hold, 8 out. Her pulse didn't move. 58 beats per minute, steady as a metronome. Then came the flicker. The cabin lights dimmed, just for a heartbeat, long enough for people to look up from their phones, long enough for whispers to ripple. Someone gasped, someone prayed. And in the middle of it, Brad Collins went pale. Tyler Chen opened his tablet, scanning the flight tracker, but the screen froze on static. That's not good. What do you mean not good? Marcus snapped. It means, Tyler said slowly, our Wi-Fi just died at 35,000 feet, which means the system did too. Maya's voice was quiet but firm. They're flying through electromagnetic interference. Brad turned toward her, his smirk replaced by something else, disbelief, maybe fear. What are you talking about? She looked up at him, eyes calm. You didn't hear it. Hear what? The phase shift in the engine hum. It dropped by 4 hertz. Tyler frowned. That's impossible to notice without instrumentation. I noticed, Maya said simply. Brad stared, his throat tight. He didn't understand her, but suddenly he wanted to. The plane rolled slightly to the right. Not much, just enough for gravity to remind everyone how high they were. Children cried. A woman whispered a prayer in Spanish. And Maya stayed still. First Officer Maria Rodriguez appeared again, steadying herself on the headrests as she walked. She looked more composed than the passengers, but her jaw was tight. She stopped beside Maya. Miss, earlier you mentioned wind shear. Maya nodded once. You're not just a frequent flyer, are you? There it was, the question that hung in the pressurized air like a secret. Maya met her eyes. Does it matter? It might, Maria said. We're losing instrumentation. The captain's isolating the fault, but if this gets worse. Maya didn't need her to finish. She knew. If this gets worse, they'd be flying blind. The first officer hesitated. If I need you, can I call on you? Maya's fingers tightened slightly around the armrest. Her scar itched, the one behind her ear, from a day she'd promised herself she would never repeat. Let's hope it doesn't come to that, she said. Maria nodded, moving back toward the cockpit. Behind her, Madison exhaled shakily. What did she mean by that? Call on her. Is she what is she? Brad didn't answer. His hands were still gripping his knees, whitening at the knuckles. Mr. Peterson was watching again. Not Maya this time, but the pilots. Their arrogance was cracking. He'd seen it before, the moment when men who thought they owned the sky realized how fragile they were inside it. Maya opened her notebook again. She began to draw quickly, quietly. What now? Marcus said, exasperated, still doodling. She ignored him. The sketch took shape, a simplified schematic of a Boeing 737's control systems. Tyler recognized it instantly. That's the aircraft we're on. She didn't look up. Yes. How do you? She raised one hand, silencing him. Her eyes were unfocused, as if she were listening to something only she could hear. The sound of systems failing, the rhythm of a plane losing trust in its own machinery. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, almost gentle. They'll ask for help soon. Brad frowned. Who? The pilots. He laughed, but it was weak. You think they'll call for you? No, Maya said softly. They'll call for anyone. And that was the difference. Another jolt shook the aircraft, violent enough to spill drinks, to scatter tablets and headphones. A tray clattered in the aisle. People screamed. The plane dropped, sudden and brutal. For 3 long seconds the feeling of weight vanished. Then the engines roared again, fighting gravity. Maya's hands went to her lap belt, tightening it, her mind already processing altitudes, descent rates, mechanical failure modes. She'd done this before over foreign soil, with flak lighting up the night sky. Except this time, she wasn't wearing a flight suit. She was wearing a coffee-stained shirt. The captain's voice came again, strained now. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. We've experienced a temporary systems issue, but we have control. He didn't sound sure. Maya knew that tone. She used it once years ago when her own jet was bleeding hydraulics and she'd told her wingman, I'm fine. She hadn't been fine. Relax, Marcus said shakily, forcing a smile. We're fine, they've got it under control. But Madison's phone slipped from her trembling hand, hitting the floor. This isn't normal, she whispered. The plane leveled, then swayed. For the first time, Brad looked at Maya without mockery. You said they'd call for help. I said they'd need it. Tyler swallowed, and if they do. Maya looked at the window. Outside, lightning flickered in the distance, a storm forming, electric alive. Then I hope they're good at improvising. The captain's voice came again. But this time, he didn't sound like a captain. He sounded like a man holding the sky together with his bare hands. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, the tension barely hidden, "if there are any military pilots on board, particularly with experience in fly-by-wire systems, please make yourself known to the cabin crew." The silence that followed was deafening. Every head turned. Every pilot who had laughed now went still. Brad's group froze in their seats, 5 Air Force officers who had mocked the wrong woman. Their faces drained of color. The irony landed like a punch. "You've got to be kidding," Marcus whispered. Tyler's lips parted, but no sound came out. They all looked at Maya. She didn't move. For 7 long seconds she said nothing. She could have stayed silent. She wanted to. But she remembered something, her mother's voice, soft and proud the day she'd earned her wings. "If you can help, you help. No matter what it costs." Maya reached for the call button. Her thumb hovered, then pressed. A soft chime. The flight attendant appeared within seconds, Jenny, calm but pale. "Yes, ma'am." "The captain asked for military pilots," Maya said simply. Jenny blinked. "Yes, are you?" F-35 Lightning II, multi-engine qualified, fly-by-wire specialist. Jenny stared, mouth open. From the row behind, Mr. Peterson stood up slowly. His spine straightened, his shoulders squared. "Chief Master Sergeant Peterson, retired, Ghost Riders 91. Brad's breath caught. Everyone in aviation knew that name. Peterson nodded to Maya. "Ma'am," he said softly. "Sergeant," she replied. Madison's phone was still recording, forgot. Her lips trembled. You're saying she's..." "I'm saying," Maya said, standing, "that your Instagram can wait." The plane shuddered again, the engines fighting the storm. Jenny grabbed Maya's arm. "Please come with me." As Maya stood, the cabin seemed to hold its breath. Every mocking face, every sneer, every cruel word now turned to awe. Brad couldn't meet her eyes. She passed them one by one, steady, silent. Madison's lips quivered. Marcus looked sick. Tyler's gaze followed her, full of regret. Only Peterson met her eyes and nodded once, proud. When she reached Brad, he whispered, "I'm sorry." Maya paused, then learned from it. She moved past him. The aircraft tilted again, turbulence or warning, it didn't matter. She steadied herself and reached the cockpit door. For a heartbeat she hesitated, feeling the weight of what was about to happen. The memories, the consequences, the ghosts. Then the first officer opened the door. And Maya Johnson, 28 years old, wearing a stained gray shirt and 1,000 unspoken memories, stepped into the cockpit. The door closed behind her with a soft hiss. And for the first time since the plane had left the ground, everyone in that cabin, soldiers, civilians, strangers, prayed for the woman they had dismissed. Because they finally understood something they'd refused to see. Dignity doesn't shout. It doesn't posture. It doesn't need to prove itself. It simply acts. And sometimes, it's the quietest person on the plane who saves everyone else. The cockpit door sealed behind her with a pneumatic hiss. Instantly, the sound changed. The hum of engines, the chatter of fear, the oxygen hiss. The cockpit had its own rhythm, the heartbeat of the sky. But right now, that heartbeat was irregular. Alarms blinked across the panels in angry reds and ambers. Warning tones overlapped, each one a different note in a symphony of panic. "Stabilizer fault, electrical bus 3 offline," the captain said, his voice sharp with focus and fatigue. He didn't even look up at first. "Captain Thomas Mitchell," he said automatically, eyes still on the console. "And you are?" "Maya Johnson," she replied, sliding into the jump seat with fluid familiarity. "Former U.S. Air Force, F-35 Lightning II, fly-by-wire qualified. That made him look up. For a heartbeat, disbelief flashed in his eyes, not because of who she was, but because of how she looked. A woman in a coffee-stained t-shirt, hair tied back, calm in the chaos. Then professionalism took over. "Thank God," he muttered. "We've got cascading failures. Primary flight computers are cross-feeding bad data to the control surfaces. It's like flying 3 different aircraft at once." "Hydraulics?" Maya asked. "Partial," said First Officer Maria Rodriguez, sweat beading on her temple. "We've lost pressure in System 2, and System 1's fluctuating." "Navigation?" "Down to basic attitude and altimeter." "Communications?" "Still up for now." Maya nodded. "All right, let's start by isolating the bad data channels." She moved fast, scanning the displays. Her fingers danced across switches and circuit breakers with the confidence of someone who had done this in a different kind of war. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't need to. In combat, hesitation killed. She found the problem almost instantly: the flight management computer fighting the pilot's manual inputs. "Your fly-by-wire's confused," she said. "It's interpreting false roll signals. We need to kill the automation before it kills us." Captain Mitchell glanced at her, reading her face, trust forming in real time. "You're sure?" Maya's eyes flicked between instruments. "You asked for a military pilot. This is what we do." He hesitated, then nodded. "Do it." Maya reached overhead. Her fingers found the breaker panel. "On my mark, Captain, pull circuit breakers 7 through 12, panel 2. He placed his hand on the breakers. "Ready." "Now." The cockpit flickered. The alarm stopped. For the first time in half an hour, the air felt breathable. Mitchell blinked. "We've got manual response." "Not for long," Maya said. "You're flying on half a nervous system. You'll lose hydraulic assist within minutes." Rodriguez turned to her. "What do we do when that happens?" Maya didn't look up. "We fly like it's 1958. Outside, the sky boiled gray and white, clouds stretching like muscle fibers. The storm was close now. Down in the cabin, the shift was immediate. The plane steadied, and a ripple of hope moved through the passengers. Madison wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Brad stared at the seat in front of him, his thoughts loud in the silence. Peterson leaned over the aisle toward them. "You boys ever fly manual reversion?" Tyler shook his head. "Never, not on a 737. "Then pray she has." Marcus let out a shaky laugh. "You're telling me we mocked a hero?" Peterson's jaw tightened. "No, son, you mocked a soldier." Back in the cockpit, Maya was already working 3 problems ahead. The backup instruments were feeding partial data, but altitude readouts were inconsistent. The left system said 28,000 feet. The right said 24. "Split indicators," she murmured. "Okay, we fly the attitude, not the numbers." She unbuckled, leaning forward to check the manual trim wheels. "We still have mechanical linkages." Mitchell nodded. "For now." "Then we use them." Rodriguez balanced thrust manually. "I'll call corrections." They fell into rhythm quickly, the way only pilots could. No ego, no rank, just coordination. "Roll 2 degrees left," Maya ordered. "Add 0.5 thrust on engine 2. Hold that." The aircraft responded sluggishly, but it responded. "Good," she said quietly. "You've got her attention again." For a few precious minutes, it almost felt normal. Mitchell risked a glance at her. "You flew F-35s." "Until 6 months ago." "Why'd you leave?" She didn't answer at first. Her eyes stayed fixed on the horizon line. "Family," she said finally. "Someone needed me more than the sky did." Rodriguez gave her a sidelong glance, something soft flickering behind her eyes. "Your mother." Maya nodded. Mitchell didn't press. He'd known enough pilots to recognize the weight behind that word. The cockpit lights dimmed again, not from power failure this time, but from thick clouds swallowing the plane whole. Static danced across the windshield like veins of light. The storm had found them. Electrical interference climbing, Rodriguez said. Maya frowned. If we lose the bus again, we lose flaps. Then what? Then we glide. Mitchell's hands tightened on the yoke. Jesus. Maya looked through the glass. The world outside was chaos, but her heartbeat was steady. Not Jesus, she said softly, just training. In the cabin, people were crying quietly now. Parents clutching children, strangers holding hands. Jenny moved up and down the aisle, her voice calm, her eyes not. Seat belts on, heads forward, just stay calm. Brad and the others sat frozen. None of their survival courses had prepared them for being powerless passengers. Tyler stared at the cockpit door, whispering to himself. She's in there flying it by hand. No computers, no autopilot. Madison blinked hard. We said she didn't belong here. Brad's eyes were wet. She belongs in the sky more than any of us ever did. Up front, the first sign of real hope appeared, a flicker of stability in the readings. Maya adjusted one dial, then another. We're leveling out, she said. Mitchell exhaled. You just saved our lives. Maya shook her head. Not yet. An alarm sounded again, this one sharper, metallic. Hydraulic pressure, 0. The captain swore. We just lost System 1. Maya's tone remained calm, but her mind raced. That gives us elevator control for about 90 seconds before it bleeds out. We'll need to use thrust to maintain pitch. Rodriguez blinked. Differential thrust. Exactly, I'll call corrections. Maya grabbed the interphone, her voice level. Jenny, this is the cockpit. Secure the cabin. We're going manual. Prepare for an emergency descent. Jenny's voice cracked slightly but came back strong. Copy that. Then the announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning an emergency descent. Please fasten your seat belts and follow all crew instructions. We are in good hands. In the cabin, people obeyed. Hands gripped armrests. Breath quickened. Prayers filled the air. But among them, 5 officers sat still, motionless except for the guilt in their eyes. Marcus whispered, "She's doing what none of us could." Peterson didn't look at him. "No, she's doing what all of you should have known she could." Back in the cockpit, Maya's focus narrowed. Every motion was deliberate, every word a command. Mitchell, pull 1% right throttle. Rodriguez, ease back on 2. The aircraft responded with a shudder, then steadied. Good, Maya said. You're flying on muscle now, feel it, don't fight it. Mitchell nodded, drenched in sweat. You've done this before. Once, Maya said quietly. Combat reversion over the med. Mitchell froze. Wait, the med, you mean? But she cut him off. Focus. He didn't press again. There were times for questions. This wasn't one. Lightning flashed ahead, and for a split second Maya saw her reflection in the cockpit glass. Calm, scarred, resolute. She didn't see a hero. She saw someone trying to earn peace. The plane dipped again, but slower this time. Controlled. The instruments stabilized enough to give them a fighting chance. Kansas City International, Maya said. Bearing 270, 85 miles. Mitchell's eyebrows rose. You know that by heart. I used to fly exercises over this corridor, she said. It's the only field with a long enough runway within range. Rodriguez grinned faintly. You're terrifyingly prepared. Occupational hazard. Outside, lightning forked across the sky like a flashbulb. The storm was closing fast. Altitude 25,000, Mitchell said. Descent rate stable. Maya nodded, but something tugged at her mind. The smell faint, acrid. Hydraulic fluid. Captain, she said, you smell that. He froze. Yeah. Check the temperature gauge. He did, climbing, over 200 degrees. Her voice dropped an octave. Line rupture, we're venting pressure. Once it hits 300, we'll lose all control authority. How long? She met his eyes. 5 minutes. They both knew what that meant. Maya looked at the old analog compass above the window. Her lips moved, calculating wind vectors, ground speed, drift. She pointed. Heading 265, hold steady, we can still make it. Mitchell nodded, but his eyes flicked to her again, something between awe and disbelief. You really are the Phantom, aren't you? Her jaw tightened. Doesn't matter who I was, only what I can do now. In the cabin, Jenny clutched the intercom, her knuckles white. Brace positions, everyone, heads down, hands over your head. Brad's group obeyed silently. No words, no ego, just fear and a strange kind of reverence. Brad whispered, if she gets us down alive, I'll never. You'll never what? Tyler asked quietly. Brad swallowed. I'll never judge anyone by their clothes again. The cabin lights flickered one last time. In the cockpit, Maya's watch buzzed, heart rate steady, 59 BPM. The calm before impact. 3 minutes, she said. Mitchell nodded. You've got this. No, Maya said softly. We've got this. The plane began its slow, trembling descent through a storm that looked like the edge of the world. And as lightning framed her face in ghostly flashes, Captain Maya Johnson, the woman they'd called trailer trash, gripped the controls of a dying plane and flew it like she was born in the sky. The storm swallowed them whole. Rain hit the cockpit windows like bullets, streaking across the glass in furious, chaotic lines. The wipers fought to keep up, squealing against the torrent. Beyond that, nothing. No horizon, no sky, just gray. Maya's hands rested lightly on the controls, feeling rather than fighting. Every vibration, every micro-shift in pressure spoke to her. The plane wasn't just metal, it was alive, wounded, begging to be handled with care. Her mind slipped into that place she hadn't visited in years, the quiet inside the chaos. The place every combat pilot learns to live in when death hovers close. Listen first, then act. Hydraulic temp 300 and climbing, Rodriguez said, her voice breaking. Keep it below 315, Maya ordered. How? Throttle modulation, Maya said. Ease one down by 0.5%. Mitchell obeyed instantly. The engines responded, rumbling deep beneath them. The temperature gauge dipped barely, but enough to buy time. Good, Maya whispered. Keep her steady, gentle on the roll. You push, she dies. Lightning flared again, so bright it turned the cockpit white for half a second. Mitchell blinked the afterimage away. I can't see anything. Instruments are useless. Then stop trusting them, Maya said. Trust the sky. It wasn't something most civilian pilots were taught. It was instinct, something that lived in the bones. Rodriguez shot her a look. You're flying blind. Maya smiled faintly. I've done worse. She had. Afghanistan. Altitude 10,000 feet. A mission that went wrong. An engine shot out mid-flight. She landed then too on sand, with smoke trailing behind her like a comet's tail. She hadn't slept properly since. Altitude, she asked. 15,000, Mitchell replied. Descent rate. 2,000 per minute. Bring it down to 1.5, don't rush her. The aircraft groaned like an old beast refusing to die. Maya adjusted the manual trim, every motion precise. We'll aim for runway 36, longest approach vector, keep the nose at 3 degrees. Mitchell swallowed. We don't have flaps, you realize what that means. Maya's eyes stayed forward. We land hot, too slow and we stall, too fast and we break. Rodriguez looked at her pale. And if we miss? Maya's jaw clenched. We don't miss. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of someone who had already buried her fear. The plane shook again, turbulence punching through like invisible fists. A panel above her head rattled loose, sparks flickering. Rodriguez flinched. We're losing secondary power. Let it go, Maya said. Focus on what we can control. She scanned the analog backup gauges. The artificial horizon twitched, the altimeter spun. It was chaos on the screens, but Maya's instincts painted the picture her eyes couldn't see. The plane was sliding left. She corrected gently, just a fingertip's worth of motion. "Bring your right engine to 93, she ordered. Mitchell complied, the shudder lessened. "Good," Maya murmured. "She's talking again." For a moment, the storm outside felt less like an enemy and more like a test. Then a jolt, hard, violent. The aircraft lurched right, throwing Maya against the harness. The entire cockpit lit up with alarms. "Lightning strike," Rodriguez shouted. Maya's heart skipped once, then steadied. "Status." Avionics scrambled, backup nav offline. Maya closed her eyes. She pictured the route in her head, the air corridors, the vector to the runway, the descent angles. When she opened them again, her gaze was clear. Heading 265, descent to 7,000. Rodriguez blinked. "How are you doing that?" Maya almost smiled. "Muscle memory." Mitchell stared at her like she was a miracle and a ghost all at once. "You've memorized flight paths." "Not all," Maya said softly. "Just the ones I was shotted over." He went silent. For the next 10 minutes no one spoke. Only the hum of engines filled the air, steady, rhythmic, fragile. Every 30 seconds Maya adjusted something. Pressure, trim, thrust. It was like she was coaxing a dying animal back to life. Outside, the storm began to thin, just slightly. Faint outlines appeared, the shimmer of light on distant ground. Mitchell leaned forward. "Is that?" "Runway lights," Maya said. "We've got visual." Rodriguez's voice cracked. "We're going to make it." Maya's eyes flicked to the warning panel. Red lights still glowed like angry eyes. "If the hydraulics hold another 2 minutes." The smell of burning insulation filled the cockpit. Mitchell coughed. "We're venting fluid." "I know." "Maya." "I know," she repeated, sharper this time. Then softer, "She'll hold, just a little longer." She wasn't talking to him anymore. The plane descended through 8,000 feet, then 7. The wind buffeted them from the right, violent crosswinds threatening to tear control away. "Compensate," Maya barked. "More power right, nose down 2 degrees." Mitchell obeyed. The aircraft steadied for a heartbeat, then bucked again. Rodriguez's voice trembled. "We're coming in too fast." "Let it bleed on contact," Maya said. "Don't brake until I say." "Ground speed." 220 knots. Rodriguez's eyes widened. "That's suicide." Maya's voice was steel. "It's survival." Lightning flashed again, and through the strobing chaos, the runway appeared. Long, wet waiting. Maya gripped the controls. Flare at 100 feet, nose up 1.5. Mitchell's breath came shallow. "Copy." The altimeter ticked down. 300. 200. 150. The engine screamed, wind roaring like an ocean. Maya's voice dropped to a whisper. "Now." The nose lifted slightly. The ground rose fast, too fast. Impact. The first touch slammed through the fuselage like a cannon shot. Tires screamed. The wings flexed. The plane bounced once, twice. "Hold," Maya shouted. "Don't brake." "Hydraulics failing." "Hold." They skidded, sparks flying. The sound a thunderous roar of metal against rain-soaked asphalt. The smell of burning rubber filled the air. Then the nose dipped. "Now," Maya yelled. Mitchell slammed the brakes. The plane groaned, slowing 100 knots, then 80, 60, 40. They slid to a halt half, a runway short of the emergency vehicles already rolling in. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Mitchell slumped forward, hands trembling. "We're down." Maya exhaled, leaning back. The adrenaline left her body all at once. Her fingers shook. She looked down, her hands were streaked with hydraulic fluid. Red, slick, glistening under the emergency lights. Rodriguez laughed, a broken, tearful sound. "You're insane." Maya managed a faint smile. "So they tell me." Outside, sirens wailed. Rain hissed on metal. The world came rushing back in. Mitchell turned to her, eyes full of something between gratitude and awe. "You just saved 247 people." Maya stared straight ahead, her voice barely audible. "No, I just did what anyone trained would have done." Rodriguez shook her head. "No one else on this plane could have." Maya didn't answer. Her hands clenched once, then relaxed. She was somewhere else again, a desert, a wreck, a radio gone silent. A ghost she could never quite bury. The cockpit door opened. Jenny stood there, soaked, trembling, eyes wide. "Is it over?" Maya nodded. "We're safe." Jenny's breath caught. "They're cheering back there, people are crying." Maya smiled faintly. "Good." But her eyes didn't match the smile. They were distant, looking beyond the rain, beyond the sirens. "Captain," Rodriguez said softly, "you okay?" Maya blinked as if waking. "Yeah." She stood, unbuckling the harness, her movements mechanical. "Let's get the passengers off. I'll stay until last." Mitchell's hand caught her arm. "Wait." She turned. "You ever think of coming back?" Maya hesitated. "Back." "To flying, to the service." She looked at him for a long time, through the exhaustion, through the noise. "I gave enough sky to the war," she said quietly. "Now I just want the ground." He nodded, understanding. When she stepped into the cabin, a wave of sound hit her, applause, crying, disbelief. People reached out as she passed, hands brushing her sleeve, voices whispering thank you. Brad stood up first, shoulders shaking. "Ma'am." She stopped. His voice cracked. "We were wrong." Maya's expression softened. "I know." Madison wiped her eyes. "How did you stay so calm?" Maya smiled faintly. "You don't get calm, you just get tired of fear." Peterson met her eyes, pride in his posture. "You fly like someone who's seen death and told it to wait." Maya gave a small nod, maybe just asked it politely. The emergency lights flickered, reflecting off the wet tarmac outside. Rain still poured, but the storm felt different now, less like chaos, more like cleansing. She walked toward the exit. The air smelled of fuel, rain, and relief. Outside, flashing lights painted the runway red and blue. As she stepped down the stairs, her boots hit the ground, solid, wet, real. The captain followed her out, then turned to the approaching rescue team. "Get her checked first," he said. Maya shook her head. "Check the passengers, I'm fine." Mitchell smiled faintly. "You sure?" Maya looked up at the gray sky, the storm breaking apart into soft light. "Yeah," she said softly. "For once I think I am." The world around her moved, medics, officers, cameras, but she stood still, rain running down her face like tears that weren't. And in that stillness, something inside her finally settled. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was falling. The silence after chaos is never peace. It's just the world catching its breath. Maya sat on the tarmac long after the last passenger had left. The rescue lights were still flashing red and white across the soaked concrete, painting her face in pulses of color. A paramedic tried again. "Ma'am, you really should let us check your vitals." "I'm fine," she said. Her voice was calm, not defiant, but it carried a weight that discouraged further argument. The medic hesitated, then nodded and stepped away. She was drenched, streaked with oil and rain, her hair plastered to her forehead. Yet her breathing was steady. Her gaze was fixed somewhere far beyond the floodlights, into the darkness where the horizon had vanished. Captain Mitchell approached, jacket draped over his arm. "They're saying it's a miracle." Maya didn't turn. "It's not. It's math and muscle memory." He gave a quiet chuckle. "You and I both know it was more than that." She finally looked at him. The exhaustion in her eyes ran deeper than fatigue. It was the exhaustion of someone who had carried too much for too long. He offered his jacket. "You should warm up." She didn't take it. "Keep it. You'll be giving statements all night." He studied her for a moment, then asked softly, "You don't like attention, do you?" Her answer came without hesitation. "I've seen what it does to people." He nodded slowly, sensing the edge in her tone, something unspoken behind it. "FAA's already here," he said after a pause. "NTSB will land in the next hour. They'll want your full account." "I'll write it down," Maya said. "They'll want to talk to you." "I'm not good at talking." He smiled faintly. "You were pretty good at flying a dying jet." She didn't smile back. "That's different." Behind them, the last of the passengers were being loaded into buses. Some were crying. Some were silent. All of them looked at her before boarding. Brad lingered longer than most. When his turn came, he stopped in front of her, drenched and shaking. "Ma'am," he began awkwardly, "I don't have the right words. I don't think I ever will." Maya just nodded. He tried again. "When you pressed that call button, I thought you were crazy." "You weren't wrong," she said softly. He gave a weak laugh, but his eyes were glassy. "You didn't just save us, you taught me something." She tilted her head. "What's that?" "That humility doesn't come from rank. It comes from character." For the first time that night, she almost smiled. "That's a start." He nodded, then stepped away. As the last bus pulled off, Maya stood alone on the tarmac. The engines were cold now. The plane that had almost killed them was just a silent shell. She took one last look at it, at the streaks of black rubber where the tires had burned, the faint scars of sparks across the metal. Then she turned and walked toward the floodlights. They put her in a small debrief room inside the terminal, gray walls, humming fluorescent lights, a table with coffee she didn't drink. Two investigators sat across from her. One spoke gently, the other like he'd already made up his mind. "You were a passenger, correct?" "Yes." "And you volunteered to assist in the cockpit?" "I was asked," Maya corrected. The first investigator nodded. "Captain Mitchell confirmed that. You took over most of the flight operations after the electrical failure." Maya didn't move. "I assisted." He exchanged a glance with his colleague. "Assisted." The second one leaned forward. "Ma'am, do you understand the gravity of what you did? You assumed operational control of a commercial aircraft mid-flight." Maya looked at him steadily. "Would you rather I had?" He blinked. "That's not." She interrupted. 247 people were alive when we landed. That's the only report I need." Silence stretched for a moment. The first investigator cleared his throat. "We're not questioning your judgment, Ms. Johnson. We're just trying to document what happened accurately." She nodded once, "Then document it." He hesitated. "Can we note your military background for the record?" "No." He blinked. "No. I don't wear the uniform anymore," Maya said quietly. "It's not relevant." The younger investigator frowned. "It might be relevant to understanding how you handled the emergency." She stared at the wall. "I didn't handle it because I was military. I handled it because someone had to." Her tone ended the discussion. They finished the interview 20 minutes later. When she stepped out of the room, the hallway was empty except for First Officer Rodriguez, leaning against the wall with two styrofoam cups of coffee. "You look like you've done this before," Rodriguez said. "Interviews. Miracles." Maya gave a faint smile. "I don't believe in those." Rodriguez handed her a cup anyway. "You should." Maya took it, the warmth seeping into her cold fingers. "You going back out there?" Rodriguez shook her head. "They're keeping us grounded for the night. You." Maya stared out the terminal window, where dawn was starting to bleed through the clouds. "Home, I guess." Rodriguez studied her quietly. "You know they're already calling you the ghost pilot online." Maya looked up sharply. Online. News picked it up an hour ago. Someone filmed the captain's announcement and your name got leaked. It's everywhere. Maya exhaled, her shoulders sagging. Of course it is. Rodriguez grinned faintly. Could be worse, you could have crashed. Maya managed a dry laugh. Not yet. By the time she reached the exit, reporters were already swarming outside the terminal, cameras flashing like lightning. She stopped just inside the sliding doors, her reflection caught in the glass. A woman in a wrinkled shirt, grease stains on her sleeves, eyes hollow but unbroken. To them, she was a headline. To her, it was just another aftershock. She turned away from the cameras and slipped out a side door instead, unnoticed. Her car was still in the long-term parking lot. The rain had stopped. The air smelled of jet fuel and morning. When she opened the door, her phone buzzed, dozens of messages. Unknown numbers. Military contacts she hadn't heard from in years. A voicemail from her former commanding officer. She didn't listen to any of them. She started the car and drove. The road home was long, gray, and quiet. The storm clouds thinned into mist, and sunlight began breaking through in fractured beams. The rhythmic sound of tires on wet asphalt lulled her thoughts into motion again. The faces came back first, the ones in the plane, the fear, the disbelief, the way they looked at her after. Then the other faces, the ones from another life, her squadron, the ones who hadn't made it back. Her fingers tightened on the wheel. She told Mitchell she left the service for family. That was true partly. But there was more. There always was. Her last mission had ended with a wingman she couldn't save. A radio that went silent mid-scream. And a wreck that never made it home. She landed her jet that night, just like today, broken, burning, but alive. They called her a hero then, too. She hadn't felt like one. She didn't feel like one now. When she reached her small house on the outskirts of town, the world was already awake. Neighbors were reading the headlines. Her face was everywhere. Unidentified female pilot saves hundreds. She sat in the car for a long minute before going inside. The house was quiet, filled with the scent of rain-soaked earth drifting through the window she'd forgotten to close. Her mother's photograph sat on the shelf, smiling, proud, taken before the illness had taken her voice. Maya walked over and touched the frame gently. "You'd hate all this attention," she murmured. She could almost hear her mother's laugh. "Then don't give them a show." Maya smiled faintly, working on it. The television was already playing in the background. News anchors replaying the same grainy video from the plane, voices heavy with awe. The unidentified woman, believed to be a former military pilot, assisted the crew in stabilizing the aircraft after multiple system failures. She muted it. Outside, the morning light spread across the wet streets like gold. Maya sat by the window watching it. Her reflection stared back, calm, tired, quietly alive. For the first time in years, the quiet didn't feel like punishment. It felt like peace trying to find her again. That night the world kept talking, interviews, theories, praise. They called her the miracle pilot, the phantom of Flight 209. Maya ignored it all. She brewed tea. She cleaned the grease from her hands. She fed the stray cat that had started showing up after her mother passed. Life, she realized, had its own kind of mission briefings, unglamorous, steady, human. And yet, when the wind shifted outside, she still looked up, instinctively listening for the sound of engines. Old habits die hardest in silence. 3 days later, there was a knock at her door. When she opened it, Captain Mitchell stood there, wearing civilian clothes and holding a folded newspaper. "I figured you want a copy," he said. The headline read, "Heroine of Flight 209 identified, former fighter pilot turned civilian." Maya sighed. "They found me fast." "Fame travels faster than fear," he said with a small smile. She stepped aside. Coffee. He nodded, entering. They sat at the small kitchen table, plain, quiet. Mitchell studied her for a moment. You really don't like being called a hero, do you? Maya looked out the window. Heroes don't flinch when they close their eyes. He didn't argue, he understood. After a long silence, he said softly, "You gave a lot of people a second chance that day." Maya nodded slowly. Then maybe that's enough. He smiled faintly. "You know, my daughter saw you on TV. She said she wants to fly now." Maya looked up surprised. She did. She said, "If she can do it, maybe I can too." For the first time since the storm, Maya smiled, small, genuine, real. "Then maybe it was worth it," she whispered. Mitchell stood, leaving the paper on the table. "If you ever want to fly again, the sky's still there." She nodded. "I'll think about it." When he left, Maya stood for a long time in the doorway, the cool wind brushing her face. The sky above was clear again, endless and blue. And for a brief moment, she closed her eyes and let herself remember what it felt like to belong up there. Not for glory, not for recognition, just for the quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after saving lives, and finally saving your own. By the fourth morning, the world had found her. Reporters had camped outside the edge of her property, drones hovering just above the trees. News vans lined the dirt road like vultures waiting for movement. Every time she stepped to the window, the flash of a camera followed, even through glass. They dug up everything: her service record, her call sign, her medals, even the mission that ended her career, the one she never talked about. Now it was everywhere, glossy headlines that reduced her years of discipline and grief to a single word: hero. She lived through worse, but somehow this felt harder. She closed the blinds. The silence inside was her last defense. The first call came from Washington. A clipped voice introduced himself as Colonel Reeve, Air Force liaison to the Department of Defense. "We'd like to debrief you officially," he said. "You've inspired quite a stir. The Secretary himself has expressed interest in meeting you." Maya's voice stayed even. "For what purpose?" "Public morale," he said. "Recruitment, outreach, aviation safety, that sort of thing. You could do a lot of good by sharing your story." "I already did," Maya replied. There was a pause. "Captain Johnson the country could use." "I'm not a captain anymore. Once a pilot, always." She ended the call. The silence that followed felt like oxygen returning to the room. That night, a letter arrived by courier, official, crisp, sealed with the insignia she used to wear over her heart. It was an offer, reinstatement, special advisory position, flexible schedule, full honors. She stared at it for a long time before folding it neatly and sliding it beneath the coffee table. The cat jumped onto her lap, purring softly. She scratched its head absently. "Looks like the sky's trying to take me back," she murmured. The cat just blinked, unimpressed. "Yeah," she said, "that's what I thought too." By day 5, the world had turned her story into something else entirely. Talk shows argued over her gender. Analysts dissected her posture in still frames. Commentators used her as proof of whatever point they were trying to make that week. One network called her the face of modern heroism. Another called her proof of broken veterans re-emerging. No one seemed interested in the truth, that she hadn't done it for any of them. Her neighbor, an old mechanic named Rourke, knocked on her door that evening. "Kid," he said, scratching his beard, "you're famous." She smiled faintly. "Uncomfortable is more accurate." He handed her a thermos of coffee. "You saved a lot of lives. That doesn't just go away." "I'm not trying to make it go away," she said. "I just don't want to live in it." He chuckled. "You can't hide from gratitude." "I can try." He studied her face, the lines of exhaustion that hadn't faded even after sleep. "You ever think the world needs people like you more than you need it?" She looked away. That's the problem. A storm rolled in that night, nothing like the one she'd flown through, but heavy enough to rattle the windows. She sat on the porch, watching the rain. The phone rang again. She let it ring. Then another call, then another. When it stopped, she picked up the remote and turned on the TV for the first time since the landing. Her face filled the screen not from interviews, but from footage she hadn't known existed. Airport surveillance, shaky cell phone clips, even her voice in the cockpit, calm under pressure. The anchor's voice carried over it. And in an unexpected twist, sources confirmed that Captain Maya Johnson was previously involved in Operation Nightfall, the classified mission that ended with 3 pilots lost and 1 surviving. Maya froze. They'd gone digging deeper than she imagined. Her name, her ghosts, all dragged into daylight. The anchor continued. Though the mission details remain classified, officials describe Johnson's actions as consistent with self-sacrifice and extraordinary composure under fire. She muted it, her breath shallow. Nightfall. Even hearing the word felt like reopening an old wound. She went to the drawer and pulled out a small box she hadn't touched in years. Inside were a few photographs, her unit, smiling in desert light, and a folded letter with edges yellowed from time. She unfolded it slowly. It was a note from her wingman, Callan, written 2 days before the mission. If anything happens, promise me you'll keep flying, because that's who you are, Maya. You don't land until everyone's safe. Her hands trembled. You didn't make it home, she whispered, but I did. She stared at the letter until the ink blurred through her tears. The next morning, the calls weren't from officials. They were from strangers. A mother who'd been on the plane, a child who wanted to become a pilot, a veteran who said she reminded him why he survived. She didn't answer any of them, but she listened to the voicemails, each one softer than the last. A voice, the same mother from row 14, said through tears, "My son, alive because of you. You don't know us, but you changed everything for us. Please don't disappear." That one made her close her eyes and press the phone against her chest. Maybe she couldn't hide forever. By day 7, the Air Force sent someone in person. A man in uniform waited by her porch, raincoat gleaming, posture impeccable. "Captain Johnson." "Not anymore." He smiled politely. "Major Thorne, I'm here unofficially." Maya gestured toward the bench. "Unofficial sounds better." He sat, setting his cap on his knee. "They're not going to stop asking. You know that, right?" "I do." "Then maybe choose how you answer. You could guide the story instead of letting them twist it." She looked at him. "Why me?" He hesitated. "Because you did something nobody else could, and you did it quietly. That scares people. It also inspires them. Those 2 things usually end badly together." Thorne smiled faintly. "Maybe, but sometimes they build legends." She didn't reply. After a long pause, he stood. "If you ever want to talk, not debrief, just talk, here's my card." She didn't take it. Instead, she said, "Tell them I'm not interested in being a legend. I just want to live." He nodded, tucked the card back into his pocket, and left without another word. That night she finally went flying again, alone this time. Not a jet, just an old single-engine Cessna she rented from a small airfield outside town. The wind was calm, the sky clear. The sun was setting in soft orange streaks across the horizon. When the wheels lifted off the ground, the world fell silent again. Up there, she wasn't the ghost pilot or the hero of Flight 209. She was just Maya, a woman with an old scar and steady hands, tracing invisible lines across the air she once called home. She leveled off at 5,000 feet, the engine purring. Below her, the patchwork of towns and rivers glowed faintly. For a long moment she said nothing, then quietly, "Callan, I kept flying." The wind answered with a whisper. She smiled through it. When she landed, the airport lights reflected in her eyes like stars. The mechanic on duty waved her in, grinning. "Thought you sworn off the sky," he said. Maya smiled. "Guess it didn't swear off me." She signed the logbook and stepped back into the cool night air. The sound of crickets replaced the hum of engines. For the first time, she didn't feel torn between past and present. She just felt whole. Back home, the news cycle had already moved on to another crisis. Her face was still online, but smaller now, replaced by fresher stories, louder tragedies. She didn't mind. She brewed tea again, opened the window, and let the night air in. Her phone buzzed once more, a message from Captain Mitchell. "They're nomming a training program after you. The Johnson procedure teaches manual reversion under pressure. Thought you'd want to know." She stared at the screen, then typed back, "Tell them to teach empathy too." Then she powered the phone off and set it aside. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the faint hum of an aircraft somewhere high above, distant, steady, free. She leaned against the window frame, watching the stars. People always assumed the sky was about power, altitude, speed, dominance. They never understood what she had learned the hard way. The sky wasn't something you conquered. It was something you respected. The ones who survived weren't the fearless. They were the humble. She closed her eyes, whispering softly to herself. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And somewhere out there, among the clouds that had once tried to kill her, the world felt quiet again. Time moved differently after fame. The days came soft and unhurried, the world returning to its ordinary rhythm. The rain faded, the reporters left, and the silence that followed wasn't hostile anymore. It was healing. Maya had started walking every morning, through the mist along the old airfield road. The grass had grown high where the hangars used to buzz with engines. A lone flag still hung on the cracked concrete wall, edges frayed but proud. She paused there one morning, hand brushing the cool metal of the gate. The wind carried the faint smell of oil and spring rain. It had been 6 years since she last stood here, 6 years since nightfall. She still remembered every sound, the engine spooling up, the radio chatter, the way Callan's voice had steadied hers just before everything went wrong. That memory had haunted her longer than any storm. Now standing under a wide gray sky, she whispered, "I'm still here." It wasn't a prayer, it was an apology. Later that day, she packed a small bag and left the house. No cameras followed this time. No one knew where she was going. The drive took her north, winding roads, small towns, miles of silence. She stopped once for gas, then again for coffee she didn't drink. Her destination wasn't on any GPS. It wasn't meant to be. By sunset, she reached a quiet cemetery just outside a sleepy coastal town. The gates were open, as if expecting her. She parked by the edge, killed the engine, and sat there for a long moment, watching the light fade into amber. Then she stepped out. The air smelled of salt and wildflowers. Somewhere nearby, waves broke against distant rocks. She walked slowly between the rows of headstones, the gravel crunching under her boots. She didn't need to look for the names. She knew where they were. Callan Wyatt, Evan Reese, Dana Holt. 3 markers in a neat row, same date, same unit insignia. The only difference was the way the wind moved through the flowers left behind. She knelt in front of Callan's. Someone, his mother maybe, had placed fresh lilies there that morning. Her fingers traced the carved letters. Capt. Callan Wyatt, wings never grounded. Maya closed her eyes. The wind picked up, gentle as if listening. "I should have been faster," she whispered. "You said to keep flying, I did, but I should have brought you home." The sound of waves filled the silence that followed. Her breath trembled. "They call me a hero now. You'd hate that. You always said heroes don't survive, they endure." She reached into her jacket pocket and took out a small silver pin, the one she'd worn on her uniform the day she left the Air Force. She kept it hidden all these years. She placed it at the base of the headstone. You carried us once, now I'll carry you in quiet. Her eyes stung, but she didn't cry. Not this time. The tears had already done their work. She stood brushing dirt from her hands and moved to the next marker. Evan had been the youngest in their squadron, 23, with a smile that outshone every medal. She remembered the way he'd bragged about buying a motorcycle when the deployment ended. He never did. She placed a small metal tag beside his name. You said you wanted speed, she murmured. Guess you got it. Her voice cracked on the last word. By the time she reached Dana's grave, the light was almost gone. The horizon glowed faintly pink, fading to deep blue. Dana had been the quiet one, precise, serious, steady. The kind of pilot everyone relied on when the chaos started. Maya touched the stone gently. I finally did what you told me. I stopped running from the sky. The wind stilled for a heartbeat, and in that pause, something inside her loosened, like a knot finally untied. She stayed until the stars appeared. When she finally turned back, someone was standing near the gate, a woman in her 50s, holding a small bouquet. Her hair was streaked with gray, her eyes sharp and kind. You must be Maya, the woman said quietly. Maya froze. Ma'am. I'm Callan's mother. The words hit harder than any headline ever could. Maya stepped closer, unsure what to say. I should have called. The woman smiled softly. You already did, the day you landed that plane. Maya blinked. You saw. Everyone saw, she said. But I didn't need the news. I knew the kind of person you were the moment Callan wrote about you. She reached into her coat and pulled out a worn letter, folded, fragile. He said, if I don't make it back, tell Maya she was the calm I needed in the storm. Maya's throat closed. He wrote that. The woman nodded, tears shimmering in her eyes. He believed in you. He always did. Maya didn't know how to respond. She just nodded slowly, staring at the ground. The older woman reached out, resting a hand on her arm. You've carried enough guilt for both of you. Let him rest, sweetheart. Let yourself rest too. That broke something open. Maya swallowed hard, blinking against the tears. I thought if I stayed quiet, it would hurt less. It doesn't, the woman said gently. But it changes. It becomes part of you in a way that doesn't ache anymore. They stood there for a long time, two women bound by loss and love, and something softer than forgiveness. When Maya finally spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. Thank you. The woman smiled faintly. You already thanked me every time you kept flying. She handed Maya one of the lilies she'd brought. Take this for the living. Maya held the flower carefully, the scent filling the cool night air. Goodbye, Mrs. Wyatt. Goodbye, Captain. Maya hesitated. I'm not. The woman's smile deepened. Oh, yes, you are. Then she turned and walked toward the car parked under the lone streetlight. The engine started, and soon the sound faded down the winding road. Maya stood there, the lily trembling in her hand. When she finally looked up, the stars were bright and clear. No storm, no noise, just sky. She didn't drive home right away. Instead, she stopped at a small diner on the edge of town, the kind that still smelled like grease and coffee. The waitress didn't recognize her, and she was grateful for that. She sat by the window, nursing a cup of black coffee. The old jukebox played something slow and nostalgic, the kind of song pilots used to hum between missions. The bell over the door jingled. Someone else walked in, a teenager in an Air Force Academy hoodie, travel bag slung over his shoulder. He looked nervous but proud. He spotted Maya sitting alone and hesitated. Then shyly he asked, "Excuse me, are you the pilot from the flight?" Maya sighed softly. "Depends who's asking." He smiled awkwardly. "Cadet first class, sir. Ma'am, heading to Colorado Springs tomorrow." She gestured to the seat across from her. "You can sit, cadet." He did, eyes wide. "I just wanted to say what you did. It's why I want to fly. Not for medals or anything, just to help." Maya studied him. He reminded her of Evan, all eagerness and promise. "You want to help," she said quietly. "Then learn what fear feels like. Not to chase it, to respect it." He nodded quickly, as if memorizing every word. "Yes, ma'am." She smiled faintly. "And remember, the sky doesn't owe you anything. You earn every inch of it." He looked at her with pure admiration. "Do you still fly?" Her gaze drifted to the window, to the distant runway, lights faintly visible on the horizon. "Sometimes," she said, "when the sky asks nicely." The kid grinned, not fully understanding, but maybe that was okay. Some lessons you only learn in the clouds. When he left, she sat there a while longer, tracing circles on the coffee cup rim. Outside, the night had deepened, quiet, infinite, forgiving. As she drove home, the radio played soft static between stations. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled faintly, not a storm, just the sky reminding her it was still alive. She smiled. "I know," she murmured. "I'll see you soon." When she reached home, she placed the lily from Mrs. Wyatt in a glass of water on the kitchen table. It looked out of place, bright and delicate in a room built on solitude. But maybe that was the point. She sat by the window again, cat curled against her legs, watching the horizon. The sky had taken much from her, but tonight it felt like it had finally given something back, not closure but peace. And for the first time since the war, she whispered to herself, not as a soldier, not as a survivor, but as a woman who had made it through. "I kept my promise." 3 years later, the sky looked different. The world had moved on, new headlines, new storms, new heroes. But her story, whispered through flight schools and training halls, never really disappeared. It had become a kind of legend told in briefings, cited in manuals, taught in quiet tones that bordered on reverence. They called it the Johnson procedure. Most cadets didn't know her face. They just knew her story. That was how she liked it. Until the letter came. It was handwritten, rare these days, on heavy stationery embossed with the seal of the Air Force Academy. "Captain Maya Johnson, it would be an honor to have you address this year's graduating class. Your story has become a lesson, but your voice could make it a legacy." She'd read it twice before folding it neatly back into the envelope. She didn't answer for a week. But on the 8th day, she packed a small bag, pressed her palm to the photo of her mother by the door, and whispered, "I'll make it quick." The airfield at Colorado Springs was alive with ceremony. Rows of cadets in crisp blue uniforms stood at attention, eyes bright, futures wide. Beyond them, families and officers filled the grandstands, the hum of pride carrying through the morning air. Maya arrived quietly, no escort, no fanfare. She wore a simple gray suit, the same color as the storm she'd once flown through. Her metal bar was small, her posture unassuming. When she stepped onto the stage, the noise faded, not because they recognized her face, but because something in her presence demanded stillness. The academy commandant greeted her with a firm handshake. "Captain Johnson," he said with quiet respect, "welcome home." She almost corrected him, not captain anymore, but something in his tone stopped her. Maybe for one day she could be. As she walked to the podium, the hum of the crowd softened into silence. She looked out over the sea of young faces, full of ambition, pride, and that quiet edge of fear that came before a lifetime of service. For a moment she said nothing, just breathed. The microphone caught the soft exhale. Then, in a calm voice that carried through the wind, she began. 3 years ago, I was just another passenger on a commercial flight. Nobody knew my name. Nobody cared who I was, and that was fine. I liked it that way. But that flight went wrong. Systems failed. Fear took over, And somewhere between the chaos and the silence, someone asked if there was a pilot on board. She paused, her eyes scanning the crowd. I remember sitting there thinking someone else would stand up. Someone in uniform, maybe. Someone younger, stronger, better qualified. But no one did. And in that silence, I realized something I'd forgotten. That sometimes you don't wait to be chosen. You just stand up and do what you were trained to do. A few cadets shifted, listening harder now. I wasn't brave that day. I was scared, everyone was. But courage isn't the absence of fear. It's walking straight into it because someone has to. Her voice softened. You'll hear people call what happened a miracle. It was. It was years of repetition, mistakes, training that burned itself into instinct. And when the world fell apart, those instincts held. She let that settle, then continued quieter. But training alone isn't enough. There's something else you'll need, something no checklist teaches. It's empathy. A few heads tilted. When everything fails, empathy is what keeps you human. It's what lets you hear the panic in a co-pilot's voice and steady it with your own. It's what helps you choose words that don't make fear worse. Machines don't have it, you do, use it. The wind tugged at her hair as she paused again. Her voice carried differently now, deeper, weighted. I wasn't supposed to be flying that day. I'd left the service. I thought I was done. But the truth is you never stop being what you are. You just stop being seen for it. She looked toward the horizon, the same horizon she'd once flown across in smoke and fire. Some of you will wear medals. Some won't. Some of you will be remembered. Some will be forgotten. But all of you will face moments when no one is watching, when you're not in uniform, when the crowd is gone, when the choice is yours alone. She leaned forward slightly, her voice soft but sharp. Those are the moments that matter. That's where honor lives, not in applause but in silence. A hush fell over the entire field. Even the wind seemed to pause. Maya's gaze swept the front row, the cadets barely 20, faces bright with hope. You'll hear people tell you that dignity means standing tall, but that's not true. Dignity isn't posture, it's restraint. It's grace under humiliation. It's doing the right thing when no one claps. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. The words landed like a slow heartbeat, echoing across the courtyard. She stepped back from the podium then, just half a step, and let the silence breathe. Then she added quietly, and when your moment comes, when fear knocks and silence follows, I hope you stand up, not because someone told you to, but because you remember that you can. Her final words lingered, carried by the breeze like a prayer to the sky itself. When she turned from the podium, the applause didn't come right away. It started small, hesitant, reverent, then grew into something larger, fuller. It wasn't the wild cheer of celebration. It was gratitude. Maya nodded once, a small, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips. Then she left the stage, her stride calm, her eyes misting in the morning light. Later that afternoon, after the ceremony, she walked alone along the edge of the airfield. Rows of cadets saluted as she passed. Some called her ma'am. One young woman whispered, "Thank you for proving we belong here." Maya stopped, turned, and smiled. "You already did." She continued walking until the noise faded behind her. Beyond the hangars, an instructor was prepping a group of students for their first solo flight. The engines of a small trainer buzzed on the tarmac, sunlight glinting off its wings. She stopped to watch. The students' hands were trembling. She could see it even from here. The instructor leaned in, said something, then stepped back and gave a thumbs up. The engine roared, and the plane began to move, slow at first, then faster, lifting off the runway with uncertain grace. Maya smiled. "There it is," she murmured, "first flight." For a second she could almost feel it again, the rush of lift, the weightlessness, the silent trust between machine and human. Then the instructor noticed her watching and waved. "Captain Johnson," he called, "care to say a few words to the next class?" She shook her head gently. "No," she called back, "let them find their own sky." He smiled, nodded, and turned back to his students. She stood there a moment longer, then turned toward the horizon. The air smelled of jet fuel and spring grass, life and flight, and something eternal between them. Her phone buzzed once in her pocket, a message from Captain Mitchell. "Heard your speech. You made the news again. Also, they're renaming the airfield where you landed. Johnson Runway. You okay with that?" Maya chuckled softly. She typed back, "As long as it keeps people flying straight." She slid the phone away and looked up at the wide, endless sky. Somewhere above, a formation of jets cut through the clouds, 3 bright streaks in perfect symmetry. For a moment her throat tightened. 3. Callan Dana Evan. Her fallen flight. She raised her hand in a small salute, still watching, The sunlight caught the edge of her palm, and for a fleeting second she imagined they saluted back. Then the jets disappeared into the blue. That evening she sat on a bench overlooking the field, notebook in hand. She began to write, not for anyone else this time, but for herself. You can't measure a life in medals or hours logged. You measure it in moments when you could have walked away but didn't. She paused, tapping the pen against the page. Some say the sky is freedom. Maybe. But to me it's a reminder that even in chaos there's balance. Even in silence there's duty. And even in loss there's light left to follow. The ink bled slightly under her fingers as she wrote the final line. Dignity doesn't need to be seen. It just needs to be lived. She closed the notebook, set it beside her, and watched the last rays of sunlight vanish behind the mountains. The field lights came on, one by one, soft, steady, like stars returning to Earth. And somewhere high above, an aircraft traced its way across the twilight sky, small, steady, unwavering. Maya smiled to herself. "You're clear for landing," she whispered. Then she leaned back, eyes closing, peace finally filling the space where ghosts once lived. And for the first time, truly, she was home. The end.